Um, I think we're ready to start.
I think so.
Is Monica in?
Yes, I was just having AirPods issue. Sorry.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm the Khalsafur, the president of National Interest Foundation. Would like to welcome you all. Would like to welcome our speakers, welcome our moderator, and just try to explain that each speaker will speak for 10 to 12 minutes, and then after that, we'll open the door for questions and answers. I ask all our audience not to give lectures, just to give a comment, short comment, and ask their question directly. And now I introduce you to William Lawrence. He's our moderator for this event, and he will be doing a great job managing this panel. Thank you very much again, and please, William, it's your turn now. Need to unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was muting myself so I could talk to Munji and make sure I understood the format. So now I'm unmuted. So let me just welcome everyone for this timely event. Tunisia is so important that I personally am involved in 5 different Tunisia panels today and several television and radio programs on Tunisia. So the world has woken up to Tunisia's political woes, and this is a perfect time and a great panel for us to delve deeply into what's going on. Let me say also by way of introduction that Tunisia has a long history of constitutionalism and a long history of political compromise, which is being challenged right now to its very core. But those of us that are longtime Tunisia watchers are sanguine that they will be able to come to a solution. Although I have to say, I just attended an event over at POMED, and in the entire hour, I didn't hear anything about the counter-revolutionary moves in Tunisia or the political parties. You know, it was as if they were living a little bit in a sort of bubble of youth activism that was going to just fix everything. There was almost too much optimism in the discussion. So I hope we'll have some balance here in discussing everything that's going on. What prompted the political crisis, by my estimation, again by way of introduction, is not the latest announcement on July 25th, but the falling apart of the Carthage Pact, informally from 2013 to 2016, and formally called the Carthage Pact in 2016, which was a kind of pacted transition on the Latin American or African or Asian model, in which elite groups work together to build and preserve a democratic system. The very pact, which is under attack now by the Tunisian populace and these other events I've been attending today. The current president has no political party. He has a popular movement, and he has seized all the powers of government. He has seized the executive branch, closed down the legislature, and is trying to personally prosecute a large chunk of parliament. So we have a total presidential power grab in an almost unprecedented way, what some call a self-coup or an autogolpe on the Latin American model, where the executive branch takes over all the branches of government and then implements the program, causing a lot of consternation around the world about the fate of the Arab world's only democracy. With this constitutional crisis in mind, we have 2 of the best people we could get today. And I mean in comparison to other panels, because this will be great and better, I think, in certain respects, that could help elucidate the nature of this crisis and perhaps the way forward. So we're going to start with Oussama, a member of parliament. His bio is available on the in the information for the event, so I won't get into that too much. But the largest party in parliament has been shut down, and effectively one democratic leader democratically elected leader is now preventing all the other democratically elected leaders in Tunisia from doing their jobs. So we're in the nature of the beast now, and now let's hear what a parliamentarian has to say about how to get out of this crisis. And with that, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, William. Thanks to everyone for this opportunity. It is important for us to talk to you, to hear from you all, to understand even the point of the situation, because for us it's a little bit crazy. We never thought that a coup is going to happen in Tunisia. We knew that the situation in the country is dangerous. People are unhappy about their democracy. They are so happy about the freedom of expression, the possibility of expressing all their opinions without any threats whatsoever. But a coup in this term was completely unexpected. And today, as a member of parliament, I mean, I have to say, tanks of military are inside the parliament and outside the parliament. Same thing for a lot of other public institutions. And it is a situation where we find ourselves in where we don't know what is going to happen. Sometimes we think the president himself, he doesn't know what he's going to do this night, tomorrow, and the day after. Without going back to talk about what happened during the first day and the second day and so on, the situation in Tunisia is people are happy, not with the coup or what happened, but I believe they are happy because there is a chance to move from the situation they had and to something else. They're not sure that this something else is going to be better for their lives, but they are sure that what they lived, the political situation in the country, in particular the situation in the parliament, was something that people they don't want to hear anymore. In Tunisia, we did a very good job in general terms in the constitution. Why now is not really respected, but we did, I believe, a big mistakes between many mistakes actually. But I believe one of the major mistakes that we did is the electoral law, because democracy without a good electoral law to give the possibility for who win the election to govern and who didn't win the election to be in the opposition, gave us a spectrum of political parties where in a small country like Tunisia, we have more than 220 political parties. Not all of them, of course, represented in the parliament, but if we look to the country as a whole, we have a crazy fragmented situation, not only inside the parliament, but in the whole institution. So each one has a political orientation and political party, and so on. This electoral law, it is a law that was put on force against Ennahdha. But the problem of Ennahdha and the mistake of Ennahdha is that didn't do enough to change it and to move to something that can give basically a kind of majority, stable majority in the parliament. More than that, Ennahdha lost a lot of his own voters. 2/3 of our voters are gone. I mean, looking to, if we compare the first election and the second one. Yes, we're still the first party. We won the election by losing 2/3 of our voters, which is something that we need in another occasion to talk a lot about it. At the same time, fragmented parliament put us in a situation, all of us, on the need to do large majorities. And large majorities never work well. And to sustain governments, this government that it is responsible that we supported. It is responsible for many of the social feeling that we have in Tunisia. It is a government sustained by 5 or 6 political parties. None of these 5 or 6 political parties has any representative in this government. But we take all the responsibility because we were, for the people, we are the ones that they were supporting this government. So economic situation, social situation without real reforms, adding to that the COVID-19 crisis that was led in a very, very bad management to it. All families in Tunisia, they were touched by death. And this death made all families in a real anger, adding to the economic situation in the country, the social situation in the country. So we were in a situation where something was about to happen. And President Qais Said took the advantage of the situation and did what he did, presenting this as not a coup, presenting this as a kind of interpretation of the Article 80, while all experts around the world, it's very easy to read the Article 80, doesn't say at all what he did. Actually, he did the total opposite of it. Today, we have a situation where most political parties, they are afraid from the president, and they are supporting the president. I'm not sure because they are really afraid, mainly because maybe they want to wash their hands from the failure that we had in Tunisia in the last months, maybe last couple of years. And civil society organizations, same thing. And the situation today is a situation where civil society, they are supporting this interpretation of the constitution to not say that it is a coup. And they are just requesting a respect of freedom of expression and basic rights in a democracy. But on the ground, this is not happening. If we see some intervention of some security forces to some journalists, not only Al Jazeera, but also many other journalists, there is no real guarantee that this country, in the first days, we're still in the first days, there's going to be a respect of a full democracy. Without talking about the, most politicians, I think all of them, civil society activists, are not allowed to leave the country. Business community, every day they are leaving for their business, they do business with the world, and they're not able to leave the country because they may be corrupted. And if they are so, they don't have the chance to leave the country without any judiciary decision. So the situation in the country is without a government. The news today is we saw President Mishishi for the first time in a picture outside his house. He went to every politician, after we end our responsibility, we have to make the declaration of all our properties and everything. We do that before we start the political position, and we do that after we end it. So for the first time, we saw for a quick picture President Mishishi doing this because, of course, he's out of the outside. He accepted to be put it out from his position. Meanwhile, we don't have any government in Tunisia, no president of the government, a lot of discussions, but seems that there are some divisions inside the palace between a name or some people, there was some suggestion coming from abroad, or someone from the palace and people next to the president to lead the government. But meanwhile, for sure, President Qais Said is not waiting. He's appointing interim minister without going to the parliament. He's appointing finance minister, telecommunication, agriculture, and same thing in many other places. And he's changing a lot of people. He's dismissing a lot of people. So the questions on what is happening, what is going on in Tunisia are a lot, but also what is going to happen in the next few days are a lot too. What we are waiting for, we're waiting for who's going to govern this country is the Interior Minister, and Defense and Justice are going to be part of the government or are going to be in the hand of the president. And the answer to this question, it is important to understand if we're going to continue to be in a democracy or to move to clearly to something else. The other important question is from where we're going to get the money, because in few weeks there are salaries they need to pay. For the salaries, and also we have some international debt payments that we need to pay. And in a video, he was talking about friend countries, and I believe by friend countries, he's talking about Gulf countries, that they are willing to sustain Tunisia in this particular situation. So these are some points on what is happening. I can add something about Ennahdha. Ennahdha had a Shura Council yesterday. Not yesterday, actually, the whole night. Was not an easy one. There are a lot of a big debate inside the party, which is normal. Ennahdha is a huge party. We talked a lot about some of these problems, about sustaining government Mishishi. That was a big mistake. Same thing about government Fafaf, the one before this. And is it the right time to put it down in the middle of crisis? So for sure, inside the party, we have a lot of different positions. And there is a debate inside the party on who's responsible on all of this, and what we're going to do for the next, how we're going to manage the situation, and eventually a national dialogue to get out from this situation. We're not getting any messages from the palace regarding the political dialogue or something like that. President Qais Said doesn't have any problem with Ennahdha in itself. I believe he doesn't believe in political parties at all. He said that many times. He have a complete different view on what kind of system we should have. It is not what we have. That's why he talked a lot about this. It's the popular, how it is a system coming from the ground. It is the popular will by several commissions on the ground that they deal and they make decision step by step till to arrive to the top of it. It's a complete different system. So is the constitution, the Tunisian constitution, enforced today? I believe not, because all the decisions that they were made by the president in the last days doesn't have anything to do with the actual constitution. Is he going to change the actual one? I believe yes. How he's going to do that, we don't know. So a lot of complicated, some of the situation is quite complicated, and it is not clear where this is going on. It's going to be in few days. The answer to the point that many international position they took regarding the 30 days. Today we heard some people really next to the president. They said there is not going to be 30 days and end of these measures. It is going to take a lot of more time, and it is impossible to end all this in only the 30 days. The whole system is going to be changed, and the 30 days is just the first step. Thank you, and I'm totally available for any questions.
Thank you, Oussama, and I'm glad we were able to drill right down into the view of a parliamentarian from the largest political party to get a sense of what it looks like from your vantage point. I find it almost hallucinatory, having again attended this panel right before this one, that the idea of compromise and the idea of transaction are taboo now. You know, that there's a kind of purist discourse that has infected Tunisian politics I haven't really seen before. Let me also say that this purge that's going on is widening in scope day by day. The the Tunisian ambassador to Washington, who just got here, just got fired. And no one knows why, except that possibly his congressional aide was on vacation and they weren't talking to the US congressmen and blocking them from making negative statements. But the whole thing is, again, hallucinatory. If you read Article 80, he's violated the spirit or the letter of every single sentence of whatever the 12 or 14 sentences. You read it. And yet I read this morning a long article by a professor from a Tunisian university justifying every single action he'd taken under the Constitution with very lawyerly language, but it's just not true. It's just discourses of, and let me say one more quick point. If I look at the Trump agenda and the Said agenda, they're almost identical, except that Said's been much more successful in implementing the Trump agenda, including changing the parliament. And yet when I make the Said comparison, I've been subject to more vitriol in the international media than any other comparison I make, because Trump's detested for other reasons. But from a political standpoint, it's a similar approach. And we're trading in some ways one set of paralyses for a new set of paralyses. So to understand that, let me turn it over to one of our favorite Tunisia analysts with a must be 10-year history now of studying Tunisia, although she dropped off the map for a little while. And now she's back in Tunisia, here to explain what's going on from the, let's say, the analytical approach. Monica Marks, professor from New York University, Abu Dhabi, the floor is yours.
All right, hi, I'm happy to be with everyone today. Can you guys hear me okay? Bill, am I getting through? All right, yeah, my Wi-Fi is on the fritz, so I'm using the phone connection. So just like throw a holler at me if you can't hear.
Will do.
All right, great. I think analysis of the past 12 days events in Tunisia has tended to fall into one of two camps that should be listening to each other more, I think, and reflecting in their analyses that they're listening to each other more. I think the first camp has been supporters of Kais Saied's actions, people who are overall optimistic about the current situation, which, we need to be honest, includes, I think, the vast majority of Tunisians are excited about what Kais Saied is doing. And for this group of people, when they hear analysts, including Tunisians, but especially foreigners, especially Westerners, come in and say that, you know, what are you guys doing to Tunisia's beautiful and brilliant democracy? What happened? What happened on Sunday, July 25th? These people say, man, have you been watching the show? Did you just now turn into the program? Because our democracy was enormously flawed. And from the perspective of a lot of Tunisians, I would say the overwhelming majority of Tunisians, democracy here, yes, it existed in name, you know, the structures existed, and yes, people were doing some work, but it wasn't actually delivering for people. Beyond freedom of expression, when you've asked Tunisians how they feel about their government, for the majority of the past 10 years, most are very frustrated because they say they have not tasted the fruits of Tunisia's revolutionary tree. People called for karama, for dignity. They didn't only mean freedom of expression. They did, but that wasn't all. They also wanted economic dignity, to be able to put food on the table, and they wanted to feel proud of themselves, not ashamed when they turned on the television and looked at their politicians. And that situation has been deteriorating steadily, I would say, for the majority of the past 10 years, but especially in the last 2 years, in part because the 2019 elections brought some very atypical actors to parliament, shall we say, most notably Abir Musi and some members of the Karama party, who are just constantly televised, beating each other up even in parliament and making a mockery of the process. And this situation, this combined with political paralysis amongst the largest parties and a sense that the largest parties are very transactional, self-interested, and potentially even corrupt, and more concerned with hanging on to their seats, you know, white knuckled at all costs, than actually coming together and putting program and vision first for Tunisians. All of this combined has really created an accumulated sense of not only frustration, but even desperation. Now you add in the COVID crisis and some of the images that people have seen on their TV screens. You know, for example, almost all Tunisians here, everybody I've met, they know someone. They have a friend, they have a cousin, they have a parent. Somebody has been bad sick with COVID. And there have been a lot of people who haven't been able to be hospitalized. So the hospitals are overwhelmed. They're seeing this circus of parliament on their television screens, you know, and there's a perception that the government isn't working for them. And then they saw the Prime Minister, Hisham Mishishi, kind of just chilling at his pool. So these are the sorts of things that insult the dignity of Tunisians. It's about putting food on the table, but it's about more than that. It's about dignity and feeling the sense from a lot of people in the government of hugra, what Tunisians call hugra. In other words, the government just not giving a damn about you. So I think any analysis of where we are at has to begin with recognizing and validating the very legitimate frustrations that most Tunisians have, that have been getting worse and worse. Okay, now a lot of Tunisians on the ground who are hopeful that Kais is an outsider, a clean, anti-corrupt outsider who can come in and shake this system so hard into being something better, they get very upset, and understandably so, when they feel like folks don't understand that, especially if those same folks are condemning a coup. All right, so that's one set of analysis, and you know, then the other set of analysis that I think we've seen accounts of the past are people who are overwhelmingly concerned, and I would say legitimately so, that Tunisia might be hurtling towards autocracy. We are in a situation right now, as the prior two speakers have said, where the president is straddling all three branches of government. I saw a great cartoon yesterday of Kaya's side straddling all three seats. So we're essentially in a system of presidential decree. We're not in a democracy at the moment. We don't know if it's going to be temporary autocracy or something more permanent. We don't know which direction it's going to go. Things could go in a variety of directions, but for the moment, we are living in an autocracy. And this understandably concerns a lot of people, especially people who were most traumatized by the Ben Ali regime, you know, because they feel like, okay, Tunisia has seen this movie before. We have a very strong system of presidential autocracy here that has, as bad as the situation was last month before this auto-gulpe attempt, we know that it can get worse. You know, it can get worse. It might feel like it can't get worse, but it can. You know, you can be thrown in the basement of the Interior Ministry for 15 plus years, tortured systematically, forced to watch videos of your wife getting raped. You know, horrible things happen. And people are being, you know, they're feeling, a lot of people are feeling re-traumatized in this moment. And it's extremely difficult, I think, on everybody's mental health, what the trauma that all Tunisians have experienced for the past couple of years, but especially for Tunisians who were most abused by the old regime. And I think we have to acknowledge the pain on all sides to have an honest analytical discussion. I've been saying that Tunisia analysis needs to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. In other words, we need to be able to acknowledge and understand the roots of people's wrath that primed them for Kais Saied's Sunday, July 25th announcements. And at the same time, we have to not underplay the very real, unique dangers of this moment. Because right now, a lot of people in Tunisia, and possibly the president too, are saying things were so bad, we're totally done with party politics. we're done with political pluralism. And we need to, at the very best, reinvent the wheel and come up with some kind of Jamahiriya Tunisia-esque local governance type radical reinvention solution at the very best. But at the very worst, that could look like what some supporters of Kais Saied, who I've been talking to, are calling a dictator ideal. Yes, he's a dictator. He might be turned into a dictator, but I mean, what's wrong with that if he's a good one? If he's an autocrat, an enlightened autocrat who can shake and break this system that is and has been weighing so hard on the shoulders of Tunisians. So for me, this is a moment of dire importance. What happens in the next few weeks will determine not only the course of Tunisian democracy for the next 20 to 30 years, if it exists, if it manages to survive somehow, to be resurrected somehow, but it will also decide or could decide the shape of democracy in the Arab world more broadly for the next generation. A lot is at stake, and people are very upset. It's a very angry, very emotional, very difficult time. But I think it's important to somehow manage to listen to everyone's pain, whilst at the same time understanding the mortal dangers of this moment. Tunisia, to me, it feels like we're playing with a loaded gun. In an effort to give the patient radical shock therapy that everyone across the ideological spectrum agrees the patient needed, we might be shooting the patient in the face. And whether or not that happens, we're going to find out over the coming days and weeks. So that's my intro.
Thank you so much. Let's go back to Oussama for a moment before we open up to questions, and I'll take the prerogative of the moderator to ask one. Ennahdha is at a crossroads right now where they have to choose between self-preservation and making concessional points to Saied in order to try to get a political system facing all the challenges both of you outlined back on track, or standing for principle, democratic principles, right? And sort of hammering away at the first narrative, the second narrative that Monica was talking about, of insisting on the violation of democratic principles, the violation of the Constitution, and even sort of building on what you said, going back to even stronger positions vis-a-vis the electoral law or the way Parliament runs, whereby Ennahdha would sort of assert its power in a more, what you called parliamentary stable way, and govern as the leading governing party, but perhaps alienate some of the constituencies that Monica was talking about. So which is it? Is it work with this president or oppose him? What's the way out?
That's a really tough question. What is clear for us, it is if we put the spectrum, our relationship with the president, and the other major issue, which is the reaction of the people, we have a better understanding what to do with our people, which is we got the message. It is a clear message. We're the most popular party. No one is more popular than us till today. I believe we're going to see what is going to happen in the next election. But Ennahdha is still the biggest party. We lost a lot. We understood this message. We want to move forward. We got responsibility for a lot of what happened. And we learned a lot. And there is an important debate inside the party. As what happened in many other parties, democratic ones, that they try to understand and to move on and to change their policies. And this is the debate inside the party regarding what happened in Tunisia. Regarding to the president, the message that is coming out, one of the first messages that we have from the first Shura Council that happened last night. It is, of course, this is complete anti-democratic. It is a very dangerous situation and so on. But our hands are open to the president because he is an elected president. And we want to find a solution to our country and to focus on the major problems that the country is facing, that we may fail on facing these crises, the economic, social, and COVID-19. These problems, to solve them, we need to work together. So from the side of Ennahdha, it is written on paper on the statement of the Shura Council, we're open to open a dialogue and to face the problems of Tunisia that led all of us to this situation.
And one question to Monica, thank you for that. One question to Monica. So Kais Saied, populist president, won with 72% of the vote. Something between 60 and 87% of Tunisians are supporting him, according to various sort of metrics and polls and analyses, because he was able to kick in the shins or slap in the face the whole political class in a way that the population was so hungry for. We know him a little bit now. People are referring to him as a black box, but we kind of know his political philosophy, and we know what's driving him, and we know what he's telling people and what he's doing. And you have the Egyptians and the Emiratis in to the palace while not meeting with Ennahdha. So what's the way out for Saied, right? There's two directions here. Either Saied goes the Napoleon III populist route and tries to rule, Tunisia without political parties and revolutionary committees and plebiscites and grabs power in a presidential, right, the negative outcome, or he starts going back to consensual politics and tries to solve the very problems he's been aggravating over the last year by rejecting prime ministers and rejecting governments and rejecting non-technocratic or even technocratic people, firing them now. So what is the way out for Saied that gets us back towards something that looks like a democratic outcome for Tunisia?
I think the answer lies in threading the needle between, or splitting the difference between those two options you just laid out. Option A being a plebiscite, kind of going the one could almost say Gaddafi inspired or an analog Jamahiriya Tunisia route, where you have like a radical reinvention of the whole system that I don't think anybody has spelled out clearly. I keep asking people who are excited about rethinking the mode of governance, the entire political system here, along some of the lines that Kais has very vaguely spelled out consistently. If you watch his YouTube videos and things for many years now, ask what would that look like, and it's very, very vague. And I don't really see how that coheres, and can easily imagine how that could get exploited and turned into, as it certainly was in Libya, a very autocratic, messy system. That's option A. Option B is going back to the same old, consensual politics, transactional politics, the Carthage Agreement 2.0, and that would incense the population. People do not want that because they don't feel like it's been working for them. So we need to be thinking about ways of making the difference. So somehow finding a solution that isn't one of those two things. That could look like having a referendum on the electoral law, so that you might create a situation in Parliament where you do have a clearer majority, and that could be more decisive. That could look like throwing some bones to Kais, where he is able to go after some people, not a broad witch hunt, hopefully, but a relatively small purging of people who are, like there are MPs in Parliament. There's a guy who was seen like masturbating outside a girls' high school, and this really upsets people. So you could like throw some of those people to the judicial system and hope that it doesn't turn into a broader purge, and then tell people we're going to have early elections, and we're going to enforce campaign financing laws more clearly, etc. It could look like that. I think it's interesting to think about why the normal rules of the game are not sufficient or are deemed insufficient by Kais and many of his supporters now. For example, why can't build a party and win, hold early elections maybe, but he's extremely popular now. He would likely dominate, and then do things the more democratic way, right? Why does he need what looks like an attempted autogolpe to get done what he wants to get done? But like you were saying, Bill, he has a long history, it seems, of being extremely suspicious of political parties, thinking that Hizbiyya is factionalist, it's corrupt, having a party system. So he's not about to do that. And it's also worth asking why a lot of his supporters, including a lot of people who are in Tunisian civil society, who are, they're so stressed and desperate that they're hopeful he can change something. It's worth asking why those folks have not built a better party too. Why do we need to burn the game board because we can't win the game? Do we need to burn up the game board? What's that going to cost Tunisia in terms of just economically? The lack of clarity for investment is really probably going to be triggering capital flight. And Kais the other day went to Utica, the employers board, and basically demanded that those employers lower their consumer prices. That's just it's not the way it works. And there's a lot of things that Kais proposes that just it's not only that's not the way it works, it can't work that way, or you're going to make the problems of economic depression and corruption even worse maybe if you do it that way. Now, his supporters by and large don't see that yet because they're so upset at the current system. But I think it's very likely that the problems Tunisians are so legitimately wrathful about, especially the economy, get worse in the short term. And I just wanted to say one or two sentences about what Oussama said about political parties needing to message that they're hearing the population. The importance of this cannot be overstated. All Tunisian political parties have problems with ego, with tragedy of longevity, with internal democracy. These problems have gotten a lot worse in Ennahdha over the recent years too. And it's been one of the key causes of disaffection with the party system, to the extent that we might see political pluralism fade away in Tunisia. People are that angry at parties, and they happen to have a president now who has, full decree powers, who also agrees with them by and large about that. So to save political pluralism in Tunisia, I think leading parties need to be considering some radical messaging. And Ennahdha, for example, Ghannouchi and one of his key advisors, Bahiri, have hung on for a very long time. And there's a lot of dissent inside Ennahdha. Oussama knows this better than I do, more than anywhere else. And I really hope, amongst other things, that Ghannouchi finally hears some of those criticisms and messages to the public and to his own party that he won't stay around forever, that this problem, that Beji Qaida Sebsi did it, he destroyed Ennahdha with nepotism and with staying around too long. A lot of other parties have done that too. It's even worse on a lot of parties of the left. This is not a secular or an Islamist problem. This is a deeply Tunisian problem. Old guys staying around way too long and not letting young people breathe. And that has a lot to do with why young people are so desperately upset and they're not hopeful in parties. They're not engaging in parties. A lot of the smartest young people have left parties, all parties. So I think some radical messaging is in order, and some exiting stage left might be in order too for some who've stuck around a long time, because the alternative could look autocratic. It could look like Kais, like a very disjointed, maybe benevolent autocracy that never really manages to change the system, this police brutality, the corruption, because Kais doesn't understand an institution and he has such a lousy team. Or it could look even worse. The economic situation gets worse and somebody like Abir Musi steps in, or somebody around Kais steps in and almost makes a coup on top of a coup somehow. So there's a lot of risks,
Thank you, Monica. So Oussama, I'm going to throw 3 questions your way, but 2 of them are interrelated and sort of telegraphic, and the second one addresses a lot of the comments, because we have many comments in the chat that aren't really questions. So the first 2, which are interrelated, are why should anyone believe there will be a next election? And what if Tunisians decide not to have a parliament at all? And so that's getting back at the sort of radical critiques that Monica has been talking about, and you referred to as well when you were discussing Kais's political philosophy. The second question, or third question rather, addressing several of the comments, but I'll put it in my words, is I met the economic team of Ennahdha in September of 2011 and meetings for 3 hours led by Elliott, the future prime minister. And I read the whole plan and had PowerPoint presentations. And I remember coming away thinking, oh my God, Ennahdha has no idea how to run the economy. The only two ideas that I saw that jumped out at me were Islamic banking, which doesn't solve Tunisia's economic crises leading to the revolution or the current protests, and a sort of recutting of Tunisia's departments in sort of pancake layers, whereby the East would fund the West, with, of course, nobody predicting what we said, which is the inevitable J curve after a revolution where the economy gets worse for a couple of years before it gets better and the East can't fund the West. So given the economic failures of the last 10 years and the mea culpa that your party leader's done on the economy, and the fact that Said surely has few ideas for the economy despite these meetings, and including with Gulf countries that may underwrite Tunisia, but that still doesn't fix the economy. How is a parliament with Ennahdha in it finally going to get to fixing the economy?
Thank you again for these questions, and it is important to talk about these problems because I believe these are the ones that they led us to this situation. In my own political party, I tried with many others to think about it. What is our detailed plan for the country? It is the price for a new democracy. We don't born like with a detailed plan what to do in the economy for each single problem. This Ennahdha party is a party that gave 40 years of its life to have a democracy, and honestly was not really prepared to govern. So if we talk about 2011, absolutely most of the people, no one of us was an MP, no one of us was a minister, no one of us was taking real responsibility. Some of us, they had the chance to be in touch with some external countries, European and Western countries, to know how democracy works and so on. Basically, but at the same time, people voted for us. And they decided that we should be the one that is going to lead the country. And this is a problem. What you should say to these people, no, I'm not ready for that, or you take your responsibility and you do what you can do. No one till now succeeded on proving that any leader of another is corrupted. So if we say that the major problem of the country is corruption, and another is leading all governments, which is not really true, since 2011 to now, and the major problem is corruption, why no leader, starting from President Ghannouchi to the last one, no one is touched by any, and when I say any, not even small, accusation of corruption. But at the same time, the crazy situation, the people, they feel that the country is full of corruption, and this party is the major party of the country, and we're against it. It is a problem. It is not easy to answer to this question. For sure, our situation as a political party compared with 2011, it is much better. Now, many of us are MPs since 8, 9 years, 10 years almost. Many of us, they went to minister, they understood their dossier. They go from theoretic studies. We have a lot of economists, and you know it is a major problem for economists to be on the theoretic side and to go to government to understand the real difficulty of the dossier and so on. I believe today Ennahdha is completely in a different situation, in a much better situation. The problem of the party didn't have enough time to be a party with a clear program. But we must say, if we look even to the program of Ennahdha as one of the important political party, and to compare the one of 2011 and the one of 2018, the one of 2018, there is a better staff that worked on this plan. There is a better staff that tried to go on some details. Then you have the difficulties that the first party in the country got less than 25% of the seats in the parliament. So what we are talking about, how you're going to manage to implement your program, how you're going to be, capable of doing so, while, in the government of Meshishi, all people, they take us responsible of this government. Why there is no one is another member, not even undersecretary, not all ministers. So it is a tricky situation where political parties are moving. They don't born with plans and clear programs, and this is happening. But the country and the problems of the country cannot wait. And as Monica talked in a very clear way, people cannot wait. And more than that, we have a war in Libya. We have a very difficult situation in Algeria. European countries, our economy, the exchange with European countries is very important. And since 2007 crisis, it is never like it used before. The economic situation in the country, the private sector, it is not improving. The challenges of all this, more youth every year are being graduated without no possibility to find jobs. Not only because it's very difficult to find jobs, but because our education system and university is putting on the market thousands of people every year in something that they will never find a job. Not is going to be very difficult, never find a job. And we couldn't manage to reform that system, which is a very difficult one, and to get to a situation where. So it is important to take to this point. I believe Ennahdha is improving a lot with its leadership, but at the same time, we didn't have the possibility to implement all this, and we took the responsibility of a government that we supported because we thought is the right thing, and there are different views inside the party about this and responsibilities and so on. But at the same time, let me say, okay, Ennahdha is bad, all political parties are bad, they don't have political solutions for the problems of the country. What are the solutions of Qais Said? Not today, since the beginning. We're listening to him. He doesn't have anything to say about the problems of the country. People, they saw him as a clean guy. It is important to say in your analysis to understand this. And the 21 guys that they run for the presidential election in Tunisia, the last one, if we put Qais Said in one side and all the 20 guys in the other side, there is an important difference. All the 20 guys, somehow, they took they were responsible for something. Many of them, they were Prime Minister, Youssef Fashad, Hamad Jbali, Mahdi Juma, many others. Many of them, they were ministers for short time, for long time. Many of them, they were no ministers, no president of the government, but they were president of a political party. Some of them, they were MPs. So all the 20 in one side, somehow in these last 10 years or 8 years before the election, they had some relationship with responsibilities, and people, they believe all these guys, they failed. Qais Said is the only one that didn't have any responsibility in no way. He was not an MP, he was not a minister, he was not a member of any political party, nothing at all. So basically, they elected the external guy without giving any importance to his plan, what he's going to do for the government, for the country, and how he's going to resolve the problems of the country. On the other hand,
go ahead.
all these 20 political parties, they were in the parliament. the circus, someone called it, and in some days it was like that. And as normal MPs, we were not able really to do anything about that, because no one can put an internal rules that can forbid this kind of attitude. And we hear even now, why do we need a parliament? Why someone says something like that? Because basically, this is the kind of parliament that they know. They don't know that parliaments around the world are the right place where policies can be discussed and they represent the real will of the people, and something can be adopted. And there is no chance to look even to this parliament, even with the leadership of President Ghannouchi. Many important laws, they were approved that they can touch the life of the people and are really important, that step by step they can, this parliament give some reforms. The problem, when we solve the problem at the parliamentary level, there is a huge problem that we're receiving from the Ben Ali regime of implementation. In other words, what I want to say at the end, it is in a political crisis, it is not easy. Actually, it is quite impossible to look to the good side and the good reform that we try to do, even with this situation at the parliament. We worked a lot for a lot of hours till midnight and more, a lot of days, but nothing of that people can solve. They remember only Abir Musi was something putting in her hand and shouting, and Saifuddin Makhlouf maybe fighting with her, and people are fighting and so on. I believe at the end, people, they want a real democracy, but not this kind of democracy.
Thank you, Oussama. You've made about 24 points today that we don't hear enough in the Western debate on Tunisia. Let me just underscore 3 of them by just listing them. Number 1, the point you made about ministers not from the parties being in these governments, but the parties then being held to account. Number 2, your point about corruption is just really, really important and not talked about enough, because this word corruption in part is so slippery, right? I heard the word corruption used twice today, just to say that if a Tunisian listens to a Westerner, they're corrupt. You know, this idea of everybody's corrupt and everybody has to be gotten rid of, it's a very slippery term. And then your point about unemployed university graduates, who are, you know, a lot of the faces we're seeing in the street now. And Tunisia does not have a demographic imbalance like so many countries in MENA and Africa. It's past its demographic transition. It has an unemployed university graduate problem, which is of a different order and needs different types of solutions. Monica, from the audience, are the folks saying things were so bad being amplified by UAE, KSA, and Egypt bots? And I'd like you to focus on the word amplified, the amplifications in the Twitter sphere and all that. The floor is yours.
I wish I could talk more knowledgeably about that. I think Bill probably know more than I do about that side of things. I've been out talking to as many people as I can from as many different persuasions as I can. I haven't been online nearly as much as I would have liked to be over the past 12 days. But I think it's important to remember that many things can be true at the same time, and this is often getting forgotten in the debate. You can have a groundswell of popular excitement and support for Kais Saied. You can have the vast majority of people excited about Kais Saied. And at the same time, have other outside interests, including outside interests from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. And on the other side, from Qatar, Turkey, and on another side, from the European Union, from the United States, etc. And all 3 of those nodes, the Western node, the Qatar-Turkey node, and the Egypt, UAE, Saudi node can be active simultaneously, trying to shape the debate in various directions. I think it is telling who presidents meet with first at critical junctures. I think it was telling that President Donald Trump met with Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia first, before anybody else, rather than a Western ally. And I think it is potentially telling that Kais Saied gave so much face time and public relations time in the media to his meeting with the Egyptian foreign minister a couple of days ago, who conveyed his support from Sisi. Now, does that mean that the protests are largely being somehow shaped by a hidden hand in Egypt or the UAE? No, not organic. And at the same time, there could be, for example, some newly created accounts on Twitter that are kind of mobbing anybody who, Tunisian or non-Tunisian, who dares to question the hopefulness of this moment, could be potentially created by outside actors who are interfering, whilst at the same time, a ton of those newly created accounts can be genuine organic accounts created by people who were never on Twitter before, who are just really excited about Kais Saied. And I think it's important to understand the nature of Kais's support. This is a guy who is seen as being very shabby, like a constitutional law professor, but very shabby, very popular at the same time. Like, he gets his coffee from the cheap place. His wife doesn't seem to want to move into the presidential palace. Nobody really seems to know. I'm not sure if they're exaggerating, but some people have said they don't really know what his two sons look like. And a lot of Tunisians love that, because the perceptions of corruption and nepotism are so widespread, sometimes unfairly, as Oussama said. I've heard a lot of kulluhum kif kif, they're all the same kind of talk. And that's actually not true. They're not all the same for people who have really been studying or actively involved in the political situation here. But you can't expect your average person on the street to necessarily know that, especially given, as Bill, you were saying, the presence of the Carthage Agreement since 2016, And I think, Western observers really encouraged Ennahdha to do this too, to go into coalition with Nida Tunis. And this logic of tawafuq, of consensus, became really embedded in, I think, Ennahdha's operational logics. And it kind of created a situation, understandably, where Ennahdha, especially as the only party that's been in every government since the revolution, gets often tarred and feathered with all of the sins of its peers in government, sometimes unfairly. And it's created a situation where nobody really seems to hold accountability. The buck never stops anywhere when everybody is sharing some responsibility at the same time. But there's going to be time for a lot of retrospectives, a lot of autocritique, as Ennahdha calls it, and other actors. But I think in this moment, it's important to stay dead focused on the threats in the moment. And those are very, very real. We could have a situation where political pluralism itself is threatened, or freedom of speech itself, for a lot of actors at least, becomes threatened. The first MP who was arrested here was Yassin Al-Ayari, who, if you're doing an anti-corruption campaign, he's about the weirdest possible person that you could have started with, because he's extremely clean. He's offended a lot of people, but he's very clean. And we don't know if he was arrested because of his criticisms, very loud criticisms of what he calls Saied's coup, or because the military just felt more empowered with the lifting of parliamentary immunity and they went after a guy that they hated. But it's ominous. The fact that Kais Saied has said nothing to denounce Yassin Ayari's arrest, that he has not released Yassin Ayari, I mean, it's very telling. Or not necessarily telling, but it's worrisome. It's worrisome. The communication style that Kais Saied used in his encounter with the New York Times journalist Vivian Yi, it's not just an isolated incident. He lectures, he monologues, he has a lot of trouble with listening. Tunisian civil society organizations have been telling me this too. So these all could be very worrying signs when you're in a situation when all three branches are really consolidated in one person's hands. So I think everybody needs to be keeping their eye on holding him accountable and finding a roadmap out. And I see so many people engaged in retrospective finger pointing, which is important, and we'll have a lot of time for that. But right now, I can't stress enough, every hour and every day matters a lot, and we haven't seen a roadmap. Nobody seems to want to be prime minister. We don't know which direction this is going to go, or how Kais, with so few allies and such a lousy network and such a little understanding of institutions, how he can possibly be the one to break the system and nizam, you know, the heart of it, the mafia families, the police brutality that Tunisians have experienced on the street all the time. You know, a lot of people have invested their hopes in Kais, and but can he really be the one with his institutional approaches and his communication style? I hope so. I certainly hope so. But all eyes need to be focused on the.
I would posit that the retrospective finger pointing is the evidence for the arguments. So as people advance whatever their point of view is on in these two camps, right? The retrospective finger pointing is the evidence they're giving, as opposed to things that are happening now in many cases. And let me just add something you said about Yassine Ayari. Yassine Ayari was thrown in jail for an old charge that he'd been convicted of, for which he had parliamentary immunity, which Kais Saied lifted in part to be able to put people like him in jail. And for what?
Well, and I'll just say that he had a court hearing scheduled for October 21st, but this extrajudicial abduction really prevented even that very unjust process of trying civilians for insulting the military and military courts. It prevented even that process from playing out.
Yes, and so Emna Giladi, who spoke, who's from Human Rights Watch, who spoke at the other panel today, she was saying, even though she's taking a line that's pretty much in favor of Kais Saied in most respects, saying it's very concerning when someone is being put in jail for criticizing the military by the military in this moment, who was in a military tribunal that's trying civilians and is unreformed. So this idea that you can change everything, but then you're using an unreformed institution to go after people for laws that are problematic is just really, really one of these alarm bells that we need to be worried about. So 2 questions for Oussama. First, Oussama, one of our audience members says, no one in Ennahdha is touched by corruption, says who? So if you could address the cleanliness of the Ennahdha. And then a second question for you, Oussama, is there a significant difference between Kais Saied and Ennahdha when it comes to following Western IMF neoliberal economic prescriptions, the same ones Ben Ali implemented? Should not accountability for the economic crisis and corruption Tunisians are suffering go beyond Kais Saied and Ennahdha or Ben Ali?
Regarding the first question, I mean, there are a lot of, media attacks, but in 10 years, none of Ennahdha member was accused by nothing related to corruption. Ennahdha is the party that supported all the laws and voted concretely, not only supported, for all the laws anti-corruption with high standards, even higher than many other democratic countries around the world. All politicians, that's something that we did, all politicians, member of political parties, not member of course, active in political parties, any minister, any prime minister, president of the republic. Actually, we added all the high responsible in the administration, all these people in the custom, in the police, and all these people, they must declare all their revenue and properties. It is one of the ways that we wanted to protect our democracy from corruption. Yes, maybe the system, honestly, to not say something that maybe can be misunderstood, the system is not working very well. But I mean, we're following step by step all these measures, and the Tunisian Parliament it is the one who voted for this, transparency. People they can and they have the right to access all information related to the government, the parliament, the presidency, ministers, any kind of decision, and it is by law. And that's why many active in civil society, they are actually they have full access to information, and this is important for accountability. Also, there are now some civil society organizations. They were created right after the approval of the law on transparency and access of information. They work only on this, and this is, I believe it is important, and it is one of the things that we're proud of, and many other things. So I believe the mistake of Ennahdha, it is a mistake that had a price. What the fragmented parliament that we were having since 2011, we had the same after the election of 2014 by NIF Zoom. NIF Zoom was not able to form a government under the leadership of Mr. Beji Qaid al-Sibsi, and we know how much was powerful Mr. Beji Qaid al-Sibsi. He was in the president palace in Carthage, and he had many political parties, his own political parties, and more supporting him. Same thing happened for us again in 2019. So when you make a deal with some other political parties, if we look to the people, they see it as a very bad thing. Personally, I may express the same opinion, and I might believe that it was wrong to make some of the alliances that we did with Tunis and many others. It is now we have an internal space inside the party. There's a dynamic. We're debating about this. We're trying to understand what are the major mistakes and how we should answer to all this. And this, it needs time. There are different opinions, and Ennahdha is a big party, and it is normal to have very strong different opinions inside a political party, and in a major situation where the party is huge with 40 years of activism. So I believe it is important to focus and think about this. Regarding IMF and Western country, Ennahdha is a party that tried to move on, tried to have a kind of vision where we diversify our relationship with a lot of countries, preserving the traditional countries where with trade, basically with European countries and neighbor countries and so on. But with the IMF, till we have a very active economy where we can really we don't need to go to any international organization for money. We cannot, move on from this. And I believe Qais Said, everyone in Tunisia is going to discover that Qais Said is going to do the same exact thing, because there are no other solutions. It is not a choice on the table. It is a situation that we have to face it and deal with it and gain from it by doing the right reforms that maybe we started to do. And we did a lot of reforms as another party. We supported a lot of these reforms, maybe because of not supporting government without being present in a very strong way in these governments. So many of these reforms, they were not implemented, and these are real problems. So what is going to happen with Qais Said is going to follow the same path, not because it's a choice. It is something that you have on the table and you have to deal with it. Is he going to do reforms better than us? I hope so.
Monica, and I encourage both panelists to look at the chat, because there's a lot of statements, but not in the form of questions that you feel free to address as we get to the final minutes here. But Monica, I'm going to turn one of those comments into a question. And the question is, how much have the Tunisians out in the streets on the 25th and 26th, and the Tunisians in general that you're talking to, assimilated democratic culture? You know, we used to hear before 2011 throughout the region, you know, we can't have democracies because the people aren't democratic yet, right? And that was, of course, often an argument used against open elections where Islamists would be elected. But also, there's just this idea that the population's not ready. And of course, my response was always, yeah, when my great grandfather fought the British, he was an illiterate farmer in Massachusetts and didn't know much about democratic culture either, but figured it out pretty quickly. But anyway, back to the question at hand, how is democratic culture in Tunisia? And when these young Tunisians support what look on the outside like autocratic moves and then seem to justify them, and we're supposed to assume that they're Democrats because they supported the revolution, while we were fearing all these non-democratic moves. How do you see that? How do you sort that in your analysis?
Yeah, I've never made much of the argument that you can't have democracy because people aren't educated enough. You know, one of my grandmothers was illiterate, but she's, you know, one of the wisest people I've ever met. But you know, I think a lot of young people who are justifying Kais Saied's moves are saying, they're using discourses like, we didn't have real democracy before, or we only had procedural democracy, but not substantive democracy. Or they're using discourses like, a lot of the abuses that people are afraid of happening now, we're getting worse now, like police brutality or extrajudicial arrests, detentions of journalists, etc. That was already happening before. To which I say, you really think things can't get worse? and also, what's the plan? More importantly than anything, this is the question right now. What's the plan? Because if Tunisians do want to hold on to what some call substantive democracy, you know, or this might include protecting things like freedom of speech, which I think Tunisians are not ready to give up. You know, maybe the word democracy doesn't mean much to a lot of them because they associate it with what a lot of them are labeling fairly or unfairly a total circus that hasn't delivered. But they do associate with freedom of speech a lot. And I think while a lot of Tunisians, maybe a disturbing number that I'm talking to, would be willing to restrict freedom of speech for groups that they disagree with, like Nathawis and some people on that side of the spectrum, most don't want to lose it. Most don't want to lose it. So, you know, I keep coming back to this big question now, what's the plan? We haven't seen much talk of a roadmap. There's a lot of retrospective finger pointing, like we said. I don't really think the question of do Tunisians want democracy is terribly valuable. There was a terrible headline in Foreign Policy the other day. It was something like, maybe Tunisians never wanted democracy anyway.
Yes,
and I thought
this article, which was roundly criticized, but yes.
Yeah, I thought it was a terrible headline, because a lot of Tunisians, when you talk to them, they came out on Sunday because they want better governance, not worse governance. And by better, I mean more representative. Now, you do have your people who have this deep autocratic, paternalistic muscle memory. And whenever they're in a crisis, they're going to look for a munqidh, the savior, the big daddy figure. That exists. You know, we saw it in the 2014 elections with Beji Qaeda Sebsi, who very much presented him that way. We see it inside almost all the different parties with you know, an egotistical, usually maybe older man who's dipping a little bit into his own ego, presenting himself as a savior. You do have that strain, I think, in Tunisian political culture, but people by and large, they really want government to represent them. And the fact that no government has, in people's view, really gone after their main concerns, the economy and this really oppressive system, the system that's, you know, of police constantly harassing people, and things just not working. Like every encounter with government or administration just defying your karama, defying your dignity, you know, it really upsets them, and they see a savior figure in Kais Saied. They might be seeing a snake oil salesman who becomes a real autocrat. They might be seeing a well-intentioned person who finds this month or the month after too difficult and ends up needing to split responsibility and brings parliament back. We don't really know which direction it's going to go. It's very dangerous. But, you know, I think finger pointing or getting angry, or even worse, culturally essentialist at Tunisians for just not having the right democratic DNA yet. You know, I think it sells short the fact that so many people want better governance. And maybe there being a lot of folks, even folks who are very educated, are I would argue being a bit quick to potentially throw the democratic baby out with the bad governance bathwater. But better governance, I think, for a lot of people is the goal. And what is Kais Said's plan for that? How exactly would this kind of esoteric Jamahiriya system work? And at what cost would it come? What opportunity cost, even if it does work, of time lost, capital flight, and everything else? These are really important questions to ask. And will civil society defend? We can call them democratic guardrails. We can call them political pluralism, due process, freedom of speech guardrails for everybody. The reaction to Yassine Al-Ayari's arrest concerns me because a lot of civil society people who you would expect they would have a problem with an extrajudicial abduction, especially in a context where immunity was just lifted and all three powers are in one man's hands, found excuses. Oh, it was a military case. Oh, it was in the past. Oh, it had nothing to do with the current moment. Oh, he's kind of a jerk. He's offended too many people. These kinds of excuses. And there is the possibility that either Kais or people around him are testing the waters. And if that is the case, I think there have been many encouraging signs that they can go farther. And this is a big threat.
I was challenged in the first question about the Trump-Said comparison, and I'm going to turn the answer over to Oussama in a minute in a different way, because we have another question on these lines. But just in 30 seconds, my Trump-Said comparison is not about the irrelevant aspects of Trump, about racism and those sort of things. But if you look at the way Trump dealt with government and governance, if you looked at how he dealt with the executive branch, how he dealt with the judicial branch, and how he dealt with the legislative branch, and what he wanted to do, and what types of laws and justifications he wanted to do, and how firing always seemed to be the solution, I can come up with a list of 30 or 40 things that Trump did that looked like what Said did, that Trump said that looked like what Said said. And it's not my panel. I won't elaborate that here, but it's a perfectly valid, not absurd criticism. And so I'd like to turn this.
Can I jump in quickly on that, Bill? I'm sorry.
We're low on time. Let me just, you'll get a concluding comment, but I wanted to turn it around to Said this way, which is Kais Said really leading what is happening?
Oussama. This question to me?
Yes.
We don't know. There are rumors, but I don't believe in rumors. We need concrete facts, informations. For sure, what is important for me that he is responsible on what is happening in Tunisia today. What is clear for me also, he doesn't know exactly what he's going to do tomorrow. We can understand this as he's a spontaneous person, and he is, or he has a clear, plan on what he's going to do. I believe the second it is what is happening in Tunisia. He is having a lot of pressure on the government, choosing the government. He didn't do that. Is he doing that just to gain time? Or he's not capable for now to make that decision, to choose someone respected that can, come up with a situation in the country, or to go for someone that he really trusts. Remember that both we're taking all responsibility, and we are responsible for many of the problems and mistakes that happen in the country. But last two presidents of the government, they were both of them chosen by Kais Said, not us. President Fakhfakh and Mishishi, both of them, they were chosen by Kais Said. The first government and the second government, mainly the second government, all ministers, they get the okay from President Kais Said, not from us. We voted for the whole government and plan and so on because we were in a crisis, and maybe it was a mistake, this vote. I don't want to defend it today, but I wanted to make the point that Kais Said is the one who chose all members of these two last governments since last election. We didn't do that. And from the other side, so what he's going to do, Mr. Mishishi, who was Mr. Mishishi? He was the legal counselor in the palace. He was just an advisor in the palace, and he chose him to be interim minister, and then he chose him to be the president of the government. And before he starts to work as the president of the government, he started to have a fight with him. And all Tunisians remember that. He basically persuaded parliament and political parties to not vote for him one day before the confidence vote in the parliament. And 3 days or 4 days before, he's the one who sent the letter, the official letter to the parliament to vote for this government, the government of Mashishi. So what I want to say is this. I mean, it is very difficult to answer to the question. It is a clear plan that he's following, or he's intervening day by day. I believe it's more day by day. And I believe when we see what happened with the ambassador in Washington, we can just remember what happened with the Tunisian ambassador in Washington. We can just remember what happened with the Tunisian ambassador at the UN. He sent him that, and he fired him in the same way, very tricky way, something that cannot happen this way, even if you disagree with him, and we don't know what are the exact reasons. So honestly, we're in a situation where questions on what is going to happen next, it is really problematic. For us as Ennahdha, we're open to dialogue, even after all he did, not because of him, but because the country needs that.
These methods of hiring, firing look very familiar to those who lived through our last president. Monica, you've got 1 minute to make whatever point you'd like to make, including.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Thanks. All right. You know, I think as I said in my opening remarks, we have to begin any analysis by leveling with the pain, the very legitimate pain that a lot of Tunisians have been feeling, and the very legitimate frustration. But we have to walk and chew gum at the same time, and understand that there are a lot of very significant threats at this moment. We don't know yet, the coming days and weeks will tell us, but we could be hurtling towards a form of autocracy. We don't know. Kais Saied, there are a lot of good reasons why many Tunisians believe in him. He seems uncorruptible. I've heard across from the political spectrum, but we also know what power does to people. And we also know that his managerial style is very controlling. You know, I've heard on multiple good sources now that he has recommended or asked if he could fire all 333 municipal heads of Tunisia and all 24 governors of Tunisia. And he was told, you know, and this is kind of what makes some people think about Trump, even though unlike Trump, Kais Saied is not a golden toilet kind of guy. He's not a corrupt kind of guy, it seems, but they have similar managerial styles, it seems, with their teams, and they're outsiders. They don't have good networks. And they ask, like Trump asked, you know, kind of like, can we bring the military? Can we shoot protesters in front, you know, of the White House? And he had to be told, no, that's not constitutional. It's ironic because Saied is, you know, he's a constitutional law professor, but he asks questions like this. He also asked on multiple sources, you know, I don't know, but they say that if he could personally prosecute the cases of 64 different parliamentarians. Now, this kind of is disturbing, especially when you're in a situation where all three branches of power are in his hands. But he seems to be confused. Like Oussama said, he seems to be making it up as he goes. We're 12 days on, there's no prime minister, there's no roadmap. That might be a good thing, we might come to see, you know, because it might lower temperatures and enable civil society to come in a little bit more. But we don't know yet. I think everyone who loves Tunisia, Tunisians first and foremost, hopefully will be focused dead center on the roadmap and on holding Saied accountable. I hope that a national front of civil society organizations forms to like really spell out clear demands on what they want Saied to do. I'm not seeing that though. I'm seeing like a huge amount of like fragmentation, different organizations and different individuals having their own specific solutions that range from something like a reinvented calling early elections, and there's a lot of confusion that's very blurry. And in a situation like this, a lot can go terribly, terribly awry. So we should all be watching. Tunisia is extremely important now.
I would like to thank our two panelists for their very insightful and somewhat unusual comments for what we're hearing about Tunisia these days. analytically granular, politically wise, and philosophically profound. So thank you, both of you, for that excellent presentation of what's going on. And I'll turn the microphone back over to the NIF.
I would like to thank our panelists. I would like to thank William for doing a great job moderating this. I'd like to thank the audience, and I think most of their questions and comments, in my opinion, were answered. I have a last question. I know we're over time. Is what do our panelists think of the future? Do they think Qais bin Said will back down, or he will continue with support of outside powers? Everyone knows that he's under pressure also to, and was promised billions of dollars in aid. So if you can just in 2 minutes, each of you give us, what do you see for the future of Tunis?
Oussama, go ahead.
Oussama, you're first.
Okay, what is it is really complicated to to understand what is going to happen with President Qais Said. For sure, what we have for now is two major problems. The first one is, are we going to have only 30 days of frozen parliament, or he's going to extend this or not? And we started to have a question, an answer to that by trusted people that absolutely is going to extend this time, and 30 days are nothing for the projects of President Qais Said. The second major problem, it is the government. Are we going to have a government? I don't know, because basically every day, in a couple of hours, more or less, he fires someone and he appoints someone else as minister or whatsoever. The request, let's talk about civil society, not only political party. Is he going to appoint a government or not? Some, they say he's not going to do so. Why he's not going to do so? Basically, all powers are in his hands now. Why he should move to something else and to have another one called president, government, or whatsoever, that he's going to share the government with him. Maybe the internal pressure and also external pressure is going to push the President Qais Said to make the decision. For sure, his actions now, they don't say that he's going to wait. So I don't have a clear answer, but what I can say, the two major points are we going to have only 30 days, or he's going to extend? Second thing, are we going to have a government now or not? We're going to continue in this situation, and it is very, very dangerous. And this government, is it going to be voted by the parliament, or something completely outside the constitution?
Monica.
You asked the $1 million question that I've been asking everyone here. I've been asking everybody, what's your best scenario, your worst case scenario, and your likeliest scenario? Let's try to game everything through. I think the best case scenario looks like...
You got a little garbled, so I'll say best case, worst case, and most likely scenario. She's been asking everyone those three questions. Go ahead, Monica.
Yeah. So I think the best case scenario looks like Qais Said makes, this is an ideal scenario, he really responds to the hopes of the people in punching straight in the face, a lot of the system that oppresses them, making really positive reforms in the Ministry of Interior and to the police, trying to work on the economy somehow. And maybe he goes after some of these MPs that have been offending people, but he doesn't stage a huge witch hunt, and he makes enough changes to elect referendum that we can have early elections that will be seen as legitimate in the eyes of the people. And then the parties will also respond to hearing the people by maybe making some of the older guys that are broadly seen as being corrupt or just have been around too long, make them kind of step to the left a little bit, make room for some new voices, give people hope, and have elections that people see as legitimate. I think that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario looks like he rapidly moves to stage a large witch hunt against all critics, including but not limited to journalists. His paranoia gets out of control. And he starts going after NGOs that have gotten foreign funding. You know, we know in an interview from an older interview, he said that he's concerned about NGOs getting foreign funding. This turns into a broad witch hunt, broad restrictions on freedom of speech, and he makes Tunisia a presidential system. He or people around him exploit that, and it really becomes a deeply repressive coup. Maybe he moves to make Ennahdha party illegal, called Tunis illegal. Maybe he tries to legally stigmatize them unfairly to the extent that political pluralism in Tunisia is essentially dies, very clearly dies, and it becomes very, very repressive, either at his hand or at the hand of somebody around him who knows how to make a plan better than he does. I think the likeliest scenario looks like he keeps asking for extensions on these 30 days, not asking, but he keeps extending. He has trouble getting his act together. Nobody really seems to come out with a roadmap. Civil society remains divided, doesn't come out with a roadmap. And finally, somebody sits on him hard enough. You know, either the economic situation needing the IMF loan, you know, if that gets, you know, conditionalized behind closed doors, you know, somebody sits on him, either regional powers, international, or you know, ideally this would be handled in Tunisian sovereignty. Tunisian civil society, the UGTT or something, would step up to the plate and be very, very clear about the red lines or guardrails and when he needs to step back. Maybe he'll go too far in staging prosecutions that fall a little bit outside the bounds of what may or may not be judicially fair. Maybe we see the military and the police get a bit too emboldened, as they've been in past days, to go after more prominent critics, but somehow we make it through to either a presidential system by referendum or a parliament in which probably not all parties might be equally allowed to compete. You know, the best case scenario I find quite idealistic, but I hope for it. But like I said before, I think, you know, we all have to understand the risks here, and the hope is that he'll be guided locally, you know, because as Tunisia finds itself mired in this crisis, Tunisian sovereignty is on the chopping block more than ever. You know, regional powers and international powers can interfere here more than ever. As Tunisia is in crisis, its economy is probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better, given the capital fear and capital flight and the lack of a plan, the lack of instability that could lead in really dangerous directions. So we'll see. We'll see. It could go in a variety of directions.
Thank you again, Monica. And I'll reconclude from the moderator's perspective again and turn things back over to NIF. Thank you both.
Thank you, William, and thank you, Monica. Thank you, Oussama. It's important to note, I don't know if anyone mentioned that there was a statement this morning by Senator Menendez and the ranking member, Senator Rich, that's from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, calling for return of democracy. I think statements like this and strong statements from Europe and the US government could make Qais Said rethink imposing a dictatorship in Tunisia. Thank you again, and have a good day. Bye.